Everyone loves them. They're furry, naughty, and lovely. The black and white bamboo eater has got us under his thumb. Panda lovers just go bananas whether these adorable living fossil is frolicking in the snow or clumsily climbing on trees. But the addictive critter comes from only one country, that's China. But in the US, it started 50 years ago. On April 16, 1972, Linlin and Xinxin arrived in Washington. They were welcomed by thousands of panda-admiring Americans and Pat Nixon, the then US First Lady. The pair she greeted became a symbol of Beijing-Washington rapprochement brokered under her husband's administration. Before the arrival of the Pandas, President Richard Nixon made a historic visit to China. On the second day of his ice-breaking journey, the Nixons went to Beijing Zoo and saw pandas there. The chubby black and white bears captured the heart of Mrs. Nixon. China promised to send 2 pandas to the US as a way of extending friendship. Overseas pandas link China and the rest of the world. Chinese and American researchers have worked together to save this once endangered species and protect them in the wild and in captivity. Cooperation has been made headways as pandas have been loaned by the Chinese government since 1980s. The cubs born in foreign countries, as stipulated, also belong to China. But half a century later, the China-US relations have gone sour. The fuzzy and gentle creatures are not cute anymore in the eyes of some American politicians.
We should not fund China's panda propaganda campaign. Let's get serious with our diplomacy and hit China where it hurts. Give freedom to the pandas and allow them to stay here in the United States.
A symbol of friendship and goodwill, or a tool for propaganda? A question for serious pundits, not for pandas. One thing is certain though, panda lovers around the world will always be captivated and asking for more.
And we're marking the 50th anniversary of panda diplomacy. I feel obliged to ask you about this. What role do you think panda diplomacy has played in US-China relations in the past half a century?
Well, it was the beginning of the opening of what was a good and fruitful relationship until recently when things have really turned sour. But it's interesting for me reflecting, it's this weekend 50 years ago that for me I had another aspect of this kind of cultural diplomacy, which was ping pong diplomacy. I went to see the Chinese ping pong team in Detroit where I was growing up. That was also part of the opening. But that was the beginning of normal relations between 2 countries that had been at odds with each other because of the events around the Chinese Civil War and afterward. And this was extremely important for the world that the United States and China began a path of not only mutual acceptance, but actually cooperation. And I think that is extraordinarily important that we get back to that path now.
But don't you think, Professor Sachs, that given the circumstances, given the realities on both sides, and given the constraints on US-China relations, the role of cultural diplomacy, i.e. panda diplomacy, is decreasing when it comes to what they can do to improve China-US relations?
It is, in fact, but that doesn't have to be our only reality. We just saw a congresswoman sternly saying we have to hit China hard. This is a terrible idea. It is a widespread idea in the United States.
In Washington or in the U.S. or just in Washington?
Well, Washington affects, unfortunately, the public media, the mass media. So we have lots of stories that say China's the enemy, which is horrible. It's based on nothing, in fact, especially when we need cooperation to fight a pandemic, cooperation to fight human-made climate change, cooperation to stop this war in Ukraine. We need the 2 sides working together. And the reality, the deep reality, is that we have common interests. But right now, the politics is unfortunately really in the U.S. side very hostile and I think absolutely wrongly directed.